I am going to read you something. It is one paragraph long. It is from a document I have in front of me. The document is a flight surgeon's evaluation, dated the 11th of June, 1999, written at Incirlik Air Base, Turkey, by a major in the United States Air Force Medical Corps whose name I am not going to say out loud tonight. The paragraph reads as follows. Subject pilot exhibited signs consistent with spatial disorientation during egress from combat airspace. Recommend grounding pending neurological and vestibular evaluation. Subject denies symptomatology. Denial is itself consistent with the diagnosis. That last sentence, read it again in your head. Denial is itself consistent with the diagnosis. If she says it happened, it happened. If she says it didn't happen, it still happened, and her saying it didn't happen proves it happened. There is no answer she can give that gets her back in the cockpit. The diagnosis is a closed loop. It is a sentence written by a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The pilot's name was Diane Holcomb. She was a captain at the time. She would later be a major. She flew F-16CS out of Incirlik for Operation Northern Watch in 1998 and 1999. She had 846 hours in the F-16 on the day that paragraph was written. She had, on her last sortie before that paragraph was written, run a SCAD package over the no-fly zone north of the 36th parallel, taken AAA from a site near Mosul, defeated it, made it home with the aircraft intact, and walked into the squadron building to debrief at 22:40 local time. Her debrief was clean. Her tape was clean. Her aircraft was clean. The flight surgeon was waiting for her in the squadron building. He had not been waiting for any other pilot that night. He had been waiting for her. I am Hatch. I am 63 years old. I spent 30 years in the United States Marine Corps, retired as a gunnery sergeant in 2007. I am not Air Force. I do not fly. I have never flown. The closest I have come to flying is sitting in the back of a CH-46 with my eyes closed, and that does not count. I am telling you about an Air Force fighter pilot tonight because the man who taught her how to land an F-16 was a friend of mine, and he asked me, 6 months ago, to look into something that had bothered him for almost 25 years. He gave me a name. He gave me a phone number. He gave me an address in Memphis, Tennessee. He said, I want to know what happened to her. I want to know if I missed something. He said, I do not think I missed anything, but I want to know. His name is Colonel Frank Lestrade, retired, United States Air Force. He was Diane Holcomb's instructor pilot at Luke Air Force Base in 1996 when she was finishing her B course in the F-16. He told me, and I am quoting him, this is verbatim, I wrote it down. She was the third best stick I ever taught. The two ahead of her are dead. One in a midair in 2001. One in a Strike Eagle over Afghanistan in 2010. She is the only one of the three I ever expected to make lieutenant colonel and command a wing. She did not. I have wondered why for 24 years. I am old now, and I do not have time to wonder anymore. Find out. That is how I came to be sitting at a kitchen table in Memphis, Tennessee, in October of last year, drinking coffee out of a mug that had a FedEx logo on it, talking to a 56-year-old woman in jeans and a gray sweatshirt, who flies 777s for a living now, who has logged 10,412 hours in civilian airframes since she left the Air Force, who has a daughter in college and a husband who is also a pilot, who does not, at any point in our conversation, raise her voice. I am going to tell you what she told me. I am going to tell you what Colonel Lestrade told me. I am going to tell you what is in the documents I have in front of me. I am going to tell you what is in the Inspector General report that took 11 months to produce and runs to 217 pages and clears her of everything and clears the flight surgeon of everything and concludes on page 214 that there is, and I am quoting, insufficient evidence to substantiate a pattern of discriminatory conduct. That sentence, insufficient evidence. After 214 pages, I want to tell you the story straight. I want to tell you it the way she told me. She did not tell me in order. She told me in pieces, the way people tell hard stories. She would start somewhere in the middle, then go back, then go forward, then stop, then go sideways. I am going to do the same thing, because if I clean it up, if I put it in chronological order, I am going to lose the shape of how she remembers it. The shape matters. She remembers it as 3 reports, not as a career, not as a war. 3 reports. The first one in 1999, the second one in 2001, the third one in 2003. 3 pieces of paper, 3 signatures, 3 diagnoses, all by the same man, all with the same outcome, all in the same file. She kept copies of everything. The copies are in a banker's box in her garage in Memphis. The box is labeled, in her handwriting, with a black Sharpie, on a piece of masking tape, AF stuff. That is what it says. AF stuff. Not USAF. Not military. AF stuff. As if the 11 years she spent in the Air Force are a category of household clutter, like Christmas decorations or old tax returns. When I asked her if I could read the contents of the box, she said yes. She said, "Take it home. Take all of it. I have not opened it in 14 years. I do not want it back. If you want to leave it in a dumpster in Tennessee when you are done, that is fine with me." She said, "I am done with it. I am telling you because Frank asked me to. Frank is the only one I would have said yes to." She said, "Tell him I am fine. I do not need him to fix it. There is nothing to fix. I am flying. I am happy. Tell him that. I am going to tell him that. He is going to get a copy of this. He will hear what she said. That is the deal we made." But first, the story. She was born in 1968 in Lincoln, Nebraska, to parents who were, both of them, professors at the University of Nebraska. Her father was a tenured professor of American history. His specialty was the Vietnam War. His specialty, more precisely, was the anti-war movement. He had written 2 books about the anti-war movement. The first one was published in 1976. The second one was published in 1983. Both books are still in print. Both books take, as their central argument, the position that the Vietnam War was a moral catastrophe, that the men who prosecuted it from Washington were criminals, and that the men who fought it on the ground were, with some exceptions, victims of those criminals who deserved compassion but not honor. He did not believe in military honor. He did not believe in military service. He had been classified 4F in 1968 due to a heart murmur, and he said in interviews, repeatedly, throughout his life, that he considered the 4F classification the single greatest piece of luck he had ever had. Her mother was a professor of comparative literature. Her mother had translated the poetry of Czeslaw Milosz into English. Her mother believed, and still believes, that war is a failure of language. That if people could speak to each other clearly, war would not happen. Her mother is 82 years old. She lives in a retirement community in Boulder, Colorado. Diane visits her 3 times a year. They do not talk about the Air Force. So that is the household. 2 professors. Lincoln, Nebraska. Books on every wall. The Sunday New York Times spread across the dining room table from breakfast until dinner. National Public Radio in the kitchen at all hours. No television, except for one small black and white set in the basement that the children were allowed to use for 1 hour on Saturdays. Diane was the older of 2 children. Her younger brother, Mark, became a poet. He teaches at Reed College. He has not spoken to Diane in 11 years. The reason he stopped speaking to her is not, technically, the Air Force. The reason he stopped speaking to her is something else. I will get to it. Diane was 8 years old when she decided she wanted to fly fighters. The decision happened on a specific day. The day was a Saturday in August of 1976. Her father had taken her, against her mother's mild objection, to an air show at the Nebraska Air National Guard base in Lincoln. Her father had not taken her because he wanted her to see fighters. He had taken her because the air show was free, the weather was good, and he had a column due to a magazine on Monday and needed the children out of the house. He sat in a folding chair near the perimeter and read galleys of someone else's book for 3 hours while Diane and her brother wandered the flight line. She walked up to an F-4 Phantom that was parked on static display. The pilot was standing next to it. He was a captain in the Nebraska Air National Guard. His name, she would later learn, was Captain Howard Lim. He was a Korean-American man, 34 years old, married, 2 daughters of his own. He saw an 8-year-old girl looking up at his airplane. He asked her if she wanted to sit in the cockpit. She said yes. He helped her up the ladder. He put her in the front seat. He let her hold the stick. He did not say to her, the way 90% of fighter pilots in 1976 would have said to her, "You are going to be a stewardess one day, kid." He said to her, and Diane remembers this exactly. She said his exact words to me, sitting at her kitchen table in Memphis, 47 years later, with no apparent strain of memory. He said, "This is a Phantom. It is the best fighter in the world. If you want to fly it, you can. Do you want to fly it?" She said yes. He said, "Then you are going to have to work very hard. Are you willing to work very hard?" She said yes. He said, "Good. Now get out of my airplane. I have a flight in 20 minutes." She climbed down the ladder. She walked over to her father. She told him she was going to fly fighters. Her father said, "That is interesting." He went back to his galleys. He thought she would forget about it by Monday. He did not understand his daughter very well. This was not unusual. He did not understand most people very well. He understood books. She did not forget about it by Monday. She did not forget about it ever. She started reading library books about airplanes. She started reading library books about the Air Force Academy. She found out, when she was 10 years old, that women had only been admitted to the Air Force Academy starting in 1976, the same summer she had sat in the F-4. She told her mother she was going to apply to the Air Force Academy. Her mother, to her mother's credit, did not say no. Her mother said, "That is your choice, Diane. We will support whatever choice you make. We will not pay for it." Her father said the same thing. They were not cruel about it. They were just, the both of them, deeply confused. They did not understand why a child raised in their house, with their books, with their values, with their dinner table conversations about Robert McNamara and William Westmoreland, would want to put on a uniform. She put on a uniform anyway. She got into the Air Force Academy in 1986. She got in on her own. She had a 4.0 GPA. She was the captain of the high school debate team. She was the editor of the high school newspaper. She had a letter of recommendation from Senator Bob Kerrey, which she had obtained by writing to him, alone, at age 16, without telling her parents. Senator Kerrey, who had lost his right leg below the knee on Hantray Island in 1969, who had received the Medal of Honor for that night, who knew something about people who chose service against the wishes of their families, wrote her a letter that was, I am told, one of the strongest letters of recommendation that the Academy received that year. She was admitted in March of 1986. Her parents drove her to Colorado Springs in August. They dropped her off at the gate. Her father shook her hand. Her mother kissed her on the cheek. They drove back to Nebraska. They did not visit her at the Academy once during her 4 years there. Not once. Not for Parents' Weekend. Not for the ring dance. Not for the day she was named to the superintendent's list. Not for graduation. I asked her, in Memphis, if that had hurt. She said, yes. She said, it does not hurt anymore. It hurt for a long time. It does not hurt anymore. She said, my parents did the best they could with what they had. They had ideas. They did not have a daughter who fit the ideas. That was not their fault. It was not my fault. It was just the situation. She graduated from the Academy in May of 1990. She was 22 years old. She went to pilot training at Reese Air Force Base in Lubbock, Texas. She was the only woman in her class of 24 students. She finished number 1 in the class. She got her choice of airframe. She chose the F-16. She went to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona, for the F-16B course in 1995 after a 4-year stretch flying T-37 instructor duty at Vance Air Force Base, which is a story I am not going to tell tonight, because if I tell it we will be here until tomorrow, but I will say this about it. She was the first female instructor pilot at Vance, and she had to fly check rides on full colonels who outranked her by 10 years and who, in 2 cases, refused to take instruction from her, and she failed both of them, on the merits, on documented errors, and the wing commander, a brigadier general named Alan Pruitt, backed her up. General Pruitt is dead now. He died in 2017. I called his widow. She remembered the incident. She said her husband had told her, at the time, that lieutenant is going to make general one day. He was wrong about that, but he was right to back her up. Frank Lestrade was her instructor pilot at Luke. He was a lieutenant colonel at the time. He had 8,000 hours in the F-16. He had been an aggressor pilot at Nellis. He had flown combat in Desert Storm. He was 44 years old, married, 3 children, no patience for nonsense. He told me, when I sat with him at his house in Tucson last summer, I had taught 210 students by the time Holcomb arrived. I had taught 2 women before her. Both washed out, not for skill, for attitude. They got tired of the harassment and they quit. I do not blame them. The harassment was real. It was not subtle. It was not occasional. It was constant. It was the wallpaper of the squadron. Holcomb walked into that wallpaper at age 27, and she did not flinch, and she did not quit, and she did not complain, and she did not, as far as I could tell, even particularly notice. She had a quality I have only seen in maybe 4 or 5 pilots in my whole career. She had what I call the inside voice. The inside voice is the voice that talks to you in the cockpit when everything is going wrong. Most pilots, in an emergency, the inside voice gets loud. It gets panicked. It crowds out the procedures. The pilots who are going to live are the ones whose inside voice gets quieter, whose inside voice goes from a normal volume to a whisper. Holcomb's inside voice was a whisper from day one. She did not have to learn to do that. She was born like that. I do not know where she got it. It was not a thing you could teach. That is what Frank told me. I am quoting him. He talked for 2.5 hours that day. I have 11 pages of notes from that one conversation. He cried twice during the conversation. Once when he was talking about Diane. Once when he was talking about a pilot named Keenan who flew the Strike Eagle and who is dead now in Afghanistan. She finished the F-16B course in March of 1996. She was assigned to the 23rd Fighter Squadron, the Hawks, at Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany. She flew there for 2.5 years. She deployed to Aviano in Italy for Operation Allied Force during the Kosovo campaign in the spring of 1999. She flew 31 combat sorties over Serbia. She did not lose an aircraft. She did not damage an aircraft. She did not break a procedure. She came home in June of 1999. She was reassigned, 3 months later, to the Triple Nickel, the 555th Fighter Squadron. Also at Aviano, for a rotational deployment to Incirlik for Operation Northern Watch. That is how she ended up at Incirlik in October of 1999. That is the road that gets her to that squadron building at 22:40 hours on the 11th of June, 2000. I said earlier that the first report was June 1999. I was wrong. The first report was June 2000. I want to correct that. The first report was the 11th of June, 2000. She had been at Incirlik for 8 months by that point. She was 32 years old. She was a captain. She had 912 hours in the F-16. She was, by every available metric, one of the most qualified captains in the Triple Nickel. She was on the short list to be sent back to the States in 18 months for the weapons instructor course at Nellis, which is the school that produces top gun equivalent pilots for the Air Force. If she had gone to weapons school and graduated, which she would have been on a track to command. She would have been a major by 2003, a lieutenant colonel by 2007, a full colonel by 2012. She would have been a wing commander by 2017. She would have made brigadier general. Frank Lestrade believes this. I believe this. The 2 former wing commanders I spoke to about her believe this. The trajectory was that clean. The flight surgeon's name. I said I was not going to say it. I am not going to. I will call him the surgeon. He was 48 years old in June of 2000. He had been an Air Force flight surgeon for 19 years. He had washed out of pilot training in 1979 due, according to his own records, to academic deficiencies in instrument procedures. He had then gone to medical school on an Air Force scholarship. He had become a flight surgeon because the flight surgeon track was the closest he could get, after washing out, to the cockpits he had wanted. He had a reputation in the squadron. The reputation was that he liked to ground people. He had grounded 31 pilots in the previous 5 years. The squadron average for a flight surgeon at his level was 8. He grounded almost 4 times the average. Of the 31 pilots he grounded, 26 were eventually returned to flight status by other surgeons or by appeals. 5 never flew again. Of the 5 who never flew again, 3 were women. The women constituted, in the squadron at that time, 11% of the pilot population. They constituted, in his groundings, 60% of the permanent ones. That is a statistic. I want to be careful about how I present it. A statistic is not a story. A statistic does not, by itself, prove that a man hates women. It is possible, in principle, that the surgeon was simply more conscientious about marginal medical conditions, and that women, due to physiological differences, presented with marginal conditions more often. It is possible. It is not, on the available evidence, what was happening. But I want to be honest that the statistic is suggestive, not conclusive. I want to be honest because Diane was honest. Diane never told me, at any point in our conversation, that the surgeon hated her. She said something more careful. She said, he did not want me there. She said, I do not know if he could have told you why. I do not know if he had thought it through. I think he just looked at me and felt something. I think the something he felt, he had been feeling for 30 years. I think he had felt it about every woman who had ever come into his squadron building. I think he wrote his report based on what he felt. I think he then went home and slept fine. That is how she put it. She said that to me with no inflection whatsoever. She said it the way you would describe the weather. There was no anger in her voice. There was no bitterness. There was, if anything, a slight clinical interest, as if she had been studying the surgeon as a specimen for 24 years and had finally, late in life, arrived at a working theory. The sortie of the 11th of June, 2000, was a SCAD package. SCAD is suppression of enemy air defenses. The package consisted of 4 F-16s, of which she was the number 3. The mission was to fly into the no-fly zone north of the 36th parallel in northern Iraq and to deter, by presence and by reactive fire, any Iraqi air defense activity. The mission was routine. They flew it twice a week. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes the Iraqis painted them with radar, which constituted, under the rules of engagement, a hostile act, which authorized return fire. On the 11th of June, the Iraqis painted them. Specifically, an SA-6 site near a town called Bashika, about 20 kilometers northeast of Mosul, came up on the radar warning receivers of all 4 aircraft at 14:47 local time. The package lead, Major Tom Wexler, declared the engagement. Diane, as number 3, was tasked with delivering a HARM, which is a high-speed anti-radiation missile, against the SA-6. She delivered the HARM at 14:48:30. The SA-6 went off the air at 14:48:46. Whether the HARM destroyed the site or whether the Iraqis simply shut down the radar to avoid the HARM is, to this day, technically uncertain. The Air Force credited her with the kill. The post-strike imagery, 2 days later, showed the SA-6 launcher still intact, but with significant damage to the associated radar van. So she got the kill, but the kill was, in the way these things often are, partial. After delivering the HARM, she took AAA. The AAA came from a different site, about 8 kilometers south of the SA-6, that had not been previously identified. The AAA was 23 millimeter. It came up at her in a curtain. She broke right, descended to 200 feet above ground level, accelerated to 480 knots, and exited the engagement zone heading southwest. She rejoined the package over the Tigris River at 15:02. The package made it home to Incirlik at 16:45. The debrief began at 17:30. The debrief ended at 21:50. The flight surgeon was waiting for her in the squadron building when she came out of the debrief. He asked to speak to her in his office. She went with him. He closed the door. He asked her if she had experienced any disorientation during the engagement. She said no. He asked her if she had experienced any visual or vestibular symptoms. She said no. He asked her if she had experienced any nausea, dizziness, or loss of situational awareness. She said no. He asked her to describe the engagement. She described it. He took notes. He asked her how low she had gone after the AAA. She said 200 feet AGL. He asked her if she was sure. She said yes. He asked her how she knew. She said because that is what the radar altimeter said. He asked her if she had checked the radar altimeter. She said yes. He asked her how many times. She said continuously. He asked her if she was sure. She said yes. He wrote his report that night. The report said she had exhibited spatial disorientation. The report cited, as evidence, her descent to 200 feet AGL during the egress, which, the report said, was, and I am quoting, inconsistent with established mission parameters and consistent with momentary loss of vertical reference. The report did not mention that the descent was a defensive maneuver against AAA. The report did not mention the AAA. The report did not mention that the package lead, Major Wexler, had observed the maneuver and approved of it during the debrief. The report did not mention that the standard egress procedure for AAA engagement, as published in the squadron's own training manual, specifically authorized descent to as low as 100 feet AGL when AAA density warranted. The report did not mention any of that. The report mentioned the descent. The report concluded, from the descent alone, that she had been disoriented. The report recommended grounding pending evaluation. She got the report on the morning of the 12th of June. It was hand-delivered to her by the squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Rich Daubert. Daubert was, by all accounts, a decent man. He had been her commander for 14 months. He had flown with her. He liked her. He told her, as he handed her the report, "I have read this. I do not believe it. The surgeon has signed it. I cannot override a signed surgeon's report on my own authority. I have to send it up. You are grounded as of this moment." "I am sorry," she said. "I understand, sir." She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. She took the paper from him. She walked out of his office. She walked back to her quarters. She closed the door behind her. She sat on the bed. She read the report through 3 times. Then she got up, walked to the desk, took a piece of squadron stationery, and wrote, in pen, in her own handwriting, the following document. I have it in front of me. It is 1 page. It is dated the 12th of June, 2000. It is addressed to the squadron commander. The body of it reads, in full, this is verbatim. "Sir, I have read the flight surgeon's report dated June 11th, 2000. The report states that I exhibited spatial disorientation during the egress portion of the sortie. I did not experience spatial disorientation during the egress portion of the sortie. I did not experience spatial disorientation at any point during the sortie. I have never experienced spatial disorientation during any sortie I have flown in any aircraft. The descent to 200 feet AGL referenced in the report was a defensive maneuver against 23mm anti-aircraft fire originating from grid coordinates I will provide upon request. The maneuver was consistent with squadron training doctrine and was observed and verbally approved by the package lead during debrief. I respectfully request a second medical opinion and a full review of the sortie tape, the package lead's debrief notes, and the radar warning receiver audio. I am ready to fly. I am not disoriented. Respectfully, Diane Holcomb, Captain, USAF. That is the second document. The handwritten rebuttal. 1 page. No emotion. No accusation. Just the facts listed. I asked her, in Memphis, if she had been angry when she wrote it. She said, "No." I asked her if she had been scared. She said, "No." I asked her what she had been. She thought about it for a long time. She said, "I had been at work. I was at work. I wrote a memo. That is what was happening. I was at work, and there was a piece of bad data in my professional file, and I was filing a correction." She said, "That is what it was. I did not let it become anything else. If I had let it become anything else, I would not have made it through the next 4 years." The next 4 years. She was grounded for 14 months. 14 months. Let me say what 14 months means for a fighter pilot. It means you lose currency on every single qualification you hold. It means your night flying qual is gone in 90 days. It means your in-flight refueling qual is gone in 120 days. It means your weapons employment quals are gone in 180 days. It means at 12 months, you are essentially a brand new pilot. You have to redo the simulator program. You have to redo the local area familiarization flights. You have to redo the formation work. You have to redo the weapons work. The entire B course, more or less, has to be done over. It costs the Air Force, in 1999 dollars, approximately $400,000 to requal a grounded F-16 pilot at the 14-month mark. The Air Force paid that money for her. They paid it because they had to. They paid it because the second medical opinion came back clean. They paid it because the third medical opinion came back clean. They paid it because the Aerospace Medical Consultation Service at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio evaluated her over the course of 8 months and concluded that there was no neurological, vestibular, or cognitive deficit of any kind. They concluded, specifically, that there was, in their words, no clinical basis for the original grounding recommendation. They wrote that. They wrote it on Air Force letterhead. They sent it to her squadron in August of 2000. The squadron sat on it for 3 months. Daubert pushed for her reinstatement. The wing commander, Brigadier General Kenneth Marsh, signed the paperwork in November of 2000. She started requal in December. She finished requal in August of 2001. She returned to operational flying status on the 17th of August, 2001. 25 days later, 2 airliners hit the World Trade Center. She deployed in October of 2001 to Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, attached to the 363rd Air Expeditionary Wing, in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. She flew 38 combat sorties over Afghanistan between October and February. She did not damage an aircraft. She did not break a procedure. She did not get grounded. The flight surgeon at Prince Sultan was a different person, a lieutenant colonel named Susan E., who had been a flight surgeon for 12 years, who had grounded, in those 12 years, a total of 9 pilots, all for documented medical reasons, all of whom were eventually returned to flight status. E cleared Diane every 2 weeks for the entire deployment. E wrote, in Diane's medical file in February of 2002, the following sentence, which is now part of the IG record I have in front of me. Captain Holcomb is the most consistently ready pilot in this wing. I have observed no medical, physiological, or psychological condition that would warrant further review. Her performance is exemplary. She came home from Prince Sultan in February of 2002. She was promoted to major in March. She was reassigned, in June, back to Aviano, and then, on a rotational basis, back to Incirlik for the continuing Northern Watch mission. She arrived at Incirlik for the second time in September of 2002. The flight surgeon, the original one, was still there. He had been there since 1996. He had not been rotated. He had not been promoted. He had not been moved. He was 49 years old. He had been at the same base for 6 years. He saw her come through the door of the squadron building on the 17th of September, 2002. Diane saw him see her. She told me she remembered exactly what his face did. She said, his face did nothing. It did not change. It did not register. He looked at me as if I had been gone for the weekend, as if no time had passed at all. As if the 14 months of paperwork and 3 medical evaluations and 8 months at Brooks and the $400,000 recall had not happened. As if I had simply walked out of the building and walked back in, and he was waiting where he had been. She knew, the moment she saw his face, that the second report was coming. She did not know when. She did not know what it would say. She knew it was coming. She told me. I went back to my quarters that night. I unpacked. I called my husband. She had married, in the interval, a fellow pilot, a major named David Holcomb. She had taken his name. He was at Spangdahlem at the time. They had been married for 8 months. They were trying for a child. She told me. I called David that night, and I told him, he is still here. The surgeon is still here. David said, we will figure it out. She said, there is nothing to figure out. I am going to fly. He is going to write something. We will deal with it when it comes. She flew clean for 6 months. October 2002 to March 2003. 41 combat sorties over the no-fly zone. 2 SAM engagements, both successful, no damage. 1 emergency divert to Diyarbakir for a fuel leak that was traced, on the ground, to a faulty fuel manifold seal. No fault of the pilot. The crew chief was disciplined. The seal was replaced. She was, by every available metric, the cleanest pilot in the squadron. Her sortie tapes were used as training material for incoming pilots. The squadron commander, by then a different lieutenant colonel, a man named Pete Yanovich, told me when I called him last fall. She was so good it was almost boring. She did not make mistakes. She did not have close calls. She did not have personality conflicts. She showed up early. She debriefed honestly. She mentored the lieutenants. She was the pilot every commander dreams of having and almost never gets. The second report came on the 4th of March, 2003. It was a different diagnosis. It had to be. The first diagnosis had been overturned by Brooks. The first diagnosis was, technically, not credible anymore. The surgeon needed something new. The new diagnosis was anxiety disorder. Specifically, the report said, and I am quoting, subject pilot exhibits signs consistent with operational anxiety disorder, including but not limited to hypervigilance during pre-flight, abbreviated verbal responses during debrief, social withdrawal in squadron environments, and reluctance to discuss personal matters with squadron medical personnel. I want to pause on those 4 signs. Hypervigilance during pre-flight. That means she was careful when she walked around the airplane. She checked things. Abbreviated verbal responses during debrief. That means she answered questions concisely. She did not ramble. Social withdrawal in squadron environments. That means she did not go to happy hour. She went to her quarters at the end of the day and called her husband. Reluctance to discuss personal matters with squadron medical personnel. That means when the flight surgeon, the same flight surgeon, asked her how her marriage was going, whether she and her husband were planning to have children, whether she felt fulfilled in her career, she said, "That is not relevant to my flying status, sir. With respect, I would prefer to keep this conversation to medical matters." That last one, that last sign, reluctance to discuss personal matters with squadron medical personnel. That is what the report cited. That is what was used to ground her the second time. Her unwillingness to tell a 49-year-old man in a closed office about whether she and her husband were trying to conceive. That was the medical evidence. She got the report from Yanovich on the 5th of March. Yanovich had read it. Yanovich was furious. Yanovich told her, and I am quoting, this is from his recollection to me on the phone. I told her, I am not going to forward this. He can write whatever he wants. I am not putting my signature on it. I will go to the wing commander tonight, and I will tell him this report does not exist. I told her that. She said no. She said, forward it, sir. She said, forward it because if we make it disappear quietly, he will write another one in 6 months, and he will keep writing them. And someone, eventually, is going to be tired enough or new enough or scared enough to act on one of them. She said, forward it. Send it up. Let it become a record. Let it sit in the system. I will fight it through the system. I am going to make this a paper trail. I am not going to let him do it in the dark." That is what she said to her commanding officer. With her career on the line, she said, "Send the report. Make a record. Let me fight it on paper." I want you to understand what that decision cost her. The paper trail she demanded took 3 years to resolve. The Inspector General investigation that I mentioned at the beginning, the 11-month investigation, the 217-page report, that came out of this decision. She filed an IG complaint on the 15th of March, 2003. She listed, in the complaint, every interaction she had had with the surgeon since 1999. She listed dates. She listed witnesses. She listed the medical records that contradicted his assessments. She wrote the complaint in her own hand on yellow legal paper, then typed it up on a squadron computer, then signed it, then submitted it through the wing IG, who forwarded it to the Major Command IG at U.S. Air Forces in Europe headquarters at Ramstein. The complaint went to Ramstein. The complaint was assigned to a major named Greg Westmore, who was an Air Force JAG officer detailed to the IG. Westmore is now a retired colonel. He lives in Williamsburg, Virginia. I called him in November of last year. He remembered the case. He remembered it in detail. He told me, and I am quoting, "I have done 140 IG investigations in my career. The Holcomb file was the cleanest complaint I ever received. Every claim was documented. Every date was verifiable. Every witness was named and reachable. I called 23 witnesses over the course of 11 months. 21 of them corroborated her account. The 2 who did not corroborate were the surgeon himself, who declined to discuss specific cases, citing patient confidentiality, and a captain named Brad Schenker, who was the surgeon's friend, who told me he did not remember any of the events I asked him about. Schenker is the only person in any of my 140 investigations who I am certain was lying to me. I could not prove he was lying. I knew he was lying. I asked Westmore why his report had ended with insufficient evidence to substantiate a pattern of discriminatory conduct. When he believed her, he was quiet for a long time. He said, "Because I could not prove the pattern. I could prove 3 reports against 3 women, including her. I could prove the statistical anomaly. I could prove the surgeon's reports were not consistent with the medical evidence. I could not prove that he was acting from gender-based animus, as opposed to, say, professional incompetence or risk aversion or general misanthropy. The standard of proof for a pattern of discriminatory conduct in an IG investigation is very high, higher than people realize. I could prove he was wrong about her. I could prove he was wrong about the other 2 women. I could not prove he was wrong about them because they were women. The report I wrote reflects that limit. It is not a finding that he did nothing wrong. It is a finding that I could not prove the specific thing I was asked to investigate. There is a difference. I have tried, for 20 years, to make sure she understood that difference. I do not think she ever fully has." That is what Westmore said. I wrote it down. He sent me a copy of the cover memo of the report, which I have. The cover memo is 2 paragraphs. The second paragraph reads, and I am quoting, "The investigating officer recommends that Major Holcomb be returned to operational flight status without restriction, that her medical file be appended with the findings of this investigation, and that future medical evaluations of Major Holcomb be conducted by flight surgeons other than the one referenced herein. The investigating officer further recommends that the medical practices of the flight surgeon referenced herein be subjected to enhanced peer review for a period of not less than 24 months. That second sentence, the peer review, that is what should have ended the surgeon's career, or at least curtailed it. It did not. The peer review was conducted. The peer review concluded that there were no actionable concerns. The peer review was conducted by 2 of the surgeon's colleagues at the same base. The peer review took 6 weeks. The peer review report is 41 pages. I have read all 41 pages. The report contains no original medical analysis. The report consists, primarily, of a review of the surgeon's case files, all of which were prepared by the surgeon, none of which were independently verified. The report concludes that the surgeon's clinical judgment is within the standard of practice for Air Force flight surgeons of comparable experience. The report is not a real document. The report is a piece of paper. The IG findings cleared Diane on the 11th of February, 2004. She was returned to flight status on the 18th of February. She flew for one more year. She flew well. She did not deploy again. She was given a staff position at Aviano, then a follow-on assignment to the Pentagon. She was on a track for promotion to lieutenant colonel. She would have made the list in 2006. She would have been on the way back up. She separated voluntarily in May of 2005. She was 36 years old. She had 11 years of active duty service. She submitted her separation paperwork on a Tuesday. She did not announce it. She did not have a retirement ceremony. She did not have a final flight. She turned in her flight gear at the Aviano supply room on a Friday afternoon. The clerk who took her flight gear was a 22-year-old senior airman named Marcus Bell. Bell did not know who she was. Bell took her helmet, her G-suit, her harness, her boots, her gloves, and her oxygen mask, and he checked them in on a clipboard, and he gave her a receipt, and he said, "Have a nice day, ma'am." She said, "Thank you." She walked out of the supply room. She drove to her quarters. She loaded her car. She drove to the gate. She showed her ID. The gate guard, a senior airman named something she does not remember, waved her through. She drove to Frankfurt. She caught a flight to Atlanta. She caught a connecting flight to Memphis. Her husband picked her up at the airport. He had separated 4 months earlier. He had already been hired by FedEx. He drove her home to a house in Germantown, Tennessee, that she had never seen. He had bought it without her. She had seen photos. The house was fine. It is the same house she lives in today. She has been in that house for 19 years. She got the FedEx job in July of 2005. She started training in September. She flew her first revenue flight as a first officer on a 727 on the 11th of November, 2005. She has been flying for FedEx ever since. 10,412 hours of civilian time. 8,000 of those hours in command after her upgrade to captain in 2010. She flew Boeing 727s, then 757s, then 767s, then MD-11s, then 777s. She is currently a 777 captain on the international long-haul roster. She flies Memphis to Paris, Memphis to Cologne, Memphis to Dubai, Memphis to Hong Kong, Memphis to Subic Bay. She flies cargo. She flies at night. She flies, mostly, alone in the cockpit with one first officer and a relief pilot for the long legs. She flies airplanes that weigh 700,000 pounds across oceans and over war zones, including, in some cases, over the same Iraqi airspace where she flew the F-16 20 years ago. Only now she is at 35,000 feet in a tube with 1,000 boxes of pharmaceuticals in the back, and the people on the ground do not shoot at her because what she is carrying is, mostly, what they ordered. She loves the job. I want to say that. She loves it. She told me, in the kitchen in Memphis, with no apparent self-consciousness. This is the best job I have ever had. The pay is better. The schedule is better. My commander is a computer. The computer does not have feelings about me. The computer assigns me trips. I fly the trips. I come home. I see my husband. I see my daughter. I sleep. I get up. I fly the next trip. There is no bullshit. There is no politics. There is no flight surgeon. There is a company medical exam every 6 months, and the doctor checks my eyes and my heart and my urine and signs the form, and I leave. The form does not get worse over time. The form is just a form. She said, I should have left the Air Force 5 years earlier than I did. I should have left right after Brooks cleared me the first time. I did not, because I thought I owed the Air Force something. I do not, anymore, think that. I think the Air Force owed me something. I do not know what. I do not need it now, but I think it owed me something, and I think it did not pay. I asked her what her parents had said when she separated. She said, "My mother said it was a relief. She said it the way you would say it about a friend whose chemotherapy had finally ended. She said, 'Thank God you do not have to do that anymore.' My father said, 'I am glad you are home.' He said it once. He did not say it again. He died in 2011. He had cancer. I sat with him in the hospital for the last 3 weeks. He never said anything else about my service. The closest he came was 2 days before he died. He said, 'You were good at it.' He said that. Then he closed his eyes. He did not open them again to talk to me. He woke up. He drank water. He ate a little ice cream. He did not talk to me about it again. He died on a Tuesday morning. The funeral was on Friday. My brother gave the eulogy. My brother did not mention the Air Force in the eulogy. My brother did not mention me in the eulogy, except to say that I had been a good daughter. I had not been a good daughter. I had been a daughter who flew fighters in a family that did not believe in fighters. I had loved my father. He had loved me. We had not understood each other. That is what should have been in the eulogy. Why? But it was not. My brother said, "She was a good daughter." And he moved on. And I sat in the third row, in my black dress, and I did not correct him. I did not stand up. I did not say, "I was not a good daughter." I was an absent daughter who loved her father from a cockpit 9,000 miles away. I let it go. I let the eulogy be what it was. I went home that night, and I flew a trip to Cologne the next morning, and I did not think about it again until you asked me just now. That is what she said. In her kitchen, in Memphis, with the FedEx mug going cold between her hands. I asked her about her brother. I asked her why Mark had stopped speaking to her 11 years ago. She said, "Because of the flag." I said, "What flag?" She said, "The flag from my father's funeral." I said, "Your father was not military. He did not get a flag." She said, "No, he did not. That is the point. I gave his casket a flag. I bought a flag at a hardware store in Lincoln, Nebraska, on the morning of the funeral. A standard American flag, 3x5, nylon, made in China probably. I folded it myself in the parking lot of the funeral home. I folded it into a triangle the way they taught me at the academy. I placed it on the casket before the service. I did not ask anyone's permission. I did not tell anyone I was going to do it. I walked in early, before the family arrived, and I put it there." She said, "My brother arrived and saw the flag, and he took it off. He took it off the casket, and he put it on a chair in the corner of the room. He did not say anything to me. He just took it off. I came in 10 minutes later, and I saw the flag on the chair, and I knew what had happened. I picked it up. I put it back on the casket. Mark came back into the room. He saw it was back. He looked at me. I looked at him. He said, 'Dad would not have wanted that.' I said, 'Dad said I was good at it. 2 days ago, he said I was good at it.' Mark said he was on morphine. He did not know what he was saying. I said, 'He knew.' Mark said, 'Take it off.' I said, 'No.' She said, 'The flag stayed.' Mark did not speak to me at the funeral. He gave the eulogy without looking at me. He left Lincoln that night. He has not called me since. 11 years. I have his number. He has mine. Neither of us has dialed. I do not think we hate each other. I think we are two people who love the same man and cannot agree on what he was. Mark thinks Dad was a pacifist who would have been horrified by a flag on his coffin. I think Dad was a man who, in his last conscious sentence to me, said, 'You were good at it.' I think that sentence was the flag. I think he gave me permission. Mark does not think so. We will never resolve this. We will probably never speak again. I am 56 years old. He is 53. We are too old to fight about it, and too stubborn to pretend it does not matter. That is the story of the flag. I did not expect it. I did not ask about it. She told me because we had been talking for 3 hours and the coffee was cold and the light in the kitchen had changed from morning to afternoon and she had stopped filtering. People do that. Sometimes, if you sit with them long enough. They stop telling you the story they prepared. They start telling you the story that is underneath the story they prepared. The flag was underneath. I want to go back to the surgeon now. I want to finish that thread. The surgeon retired in 2008. He had 30 years of service. He retired as a full colonel. He received, upon his retirement, the Legion of Merit. The citation for the Legion of Merit reads, in part, and I am quoting from a publicly available record, for exceptionally meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding services to the United States Air Force from June 1978 to September 2008. Colonel, name, distinguished himself through sustained superior performance in the field of aerospace medicine, contributing directly to the combat readiness of multiple fighter squadrons across 3 major commands. Contributing directly to the combat readiness of multiple fighter squadrons. That is what the citation says about a man who grounded 31 pilots, 26 of whom were cleared by other doctors, 5 of whom never flew again, 3 of whom were women, contributing directly to combat readiness. By removing pilots from cockpits, the Air Force gave him a medal for it. He lives in San Antonio now. I know his address. I will not say it. I wrote him a letter. I wrote it in November of last year, after I had spoken to Diane, after I had spoken to Lestrade, after I had spoken to Westmore, after I had read the IG report. I wrote him a polite letter. I identified myself. I told him I was writing about the experiences of female fighter pilots in the 1990s and 2000s. I asked him if he would be willing to speak with me. I gave him my phone number. I gave him my email. I gave him a self-addressed stamped envelope. He did not respond. I wrote a second letter in January of this year. Same tone, same request, same self-addressed stamped envelope. He did not respond. I called the phone number I had for him. It rang 4 times. A woman answered. She said, "He is not available." I said, "May I leave a message?" She said, "He does not take calls from people he does not know." I said, "Ma'am, I just have one question for him." She said, "He is not available." She hung up. That is the end of the surgeon. He is 72 years old. He lives in San Antonio. He has his Legion of Merit. He has his retirement. He has his 30 years. He has his wife who screens his calls. He has never, as far as I can determine, been asked by anyone in any official capacity to explain why he grounded Diane Holcomb twice on diagnoses that were overturned both times. He has never been asked to explain why 3 of his 5 permanent groundings were women. He has never been asked to explain why he was waiting for her in the squadron building at 2240 on the night of June 11th, 2000, after a sortie he had not flown and a debrief he had not attended. He has never been asked any of these questions. He will probably never be asked. He is 72. He is retired. He is in San Antonio. He is done. Diane is not done. Diane is 56. Diane is still flying. Diane will fly until she is 65, which is the mandatory retirement age for airline pilots in the United States. She has 9 more years. She will log, by the time she is done, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15,000 total flight hours. Military and civilian combined. 15,000 hours in the air. She could have had 20,000. She could have had a wing command. She could have had a star on her shoulder. She could have been the first female wing commander of a combat fighter wing. She was not, because of 3 pieces of paper written by one man who did not want her there. I asked her at the end, in the kitchen, with the light going orange through the window, "What do you want? What do you want from this? What do you want me to do with what you have told me?" She said, "Nothing." She said, "I do not want anything." I said, "Do you want people to know?" She said, "I do not care if they know. I do not need them to know. I am not angry anymore. I was angry for a long time. I am not angry anymore. I am flying. I am good at it. I was always good at it. One man tried to take that away from me. He did not succeed. He slowed me down. He cost me years. He cost me rank. He cost me a career I had earned. But he did not take the thing itself. The thing itself is the flying. The flying is mine. It was always mine. It is still mine. He could not touch it." She said that. She said it looking out the window at the backyard, where there was a magnolia tree and a bird feeder and a gray sky. She was not looking at me. She was not performing. She was just saying it. The way you say something you have thought about for a very long time and have finally, late in life, decided is true. I drove away from her house at 4 in the afternoon. I had been there since 9 in the morning. 7 hours. She had talked for 5 of them. I had the banker's box in the trunk of my rental car. AF stuff. I drove to the airport. I caught a flight to Tucson. I sat with Lestrade the next morning. I told him what she said. I told him, she is fine. She is happy. She is flying. She told me to tell you that. He nodded. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, good. He said, that is good. He said, she deserved better than what she got. I said yes. He said, but she is flying. I said yes. He said, then she won. I do not know if she won. I do not know what winning means in this context. I know what losing means. Losing means the surgeon succeeded. Losing means she stopped flying. She did not stop flying. She never stopped flying. Even during the 14 months, she flew simulators. Even during the IG investigation, she flew a Cessna 172 out of a civilian field near Aviano on weekends, alone, with nobody in the right seat, just to keep her hands on a stick and her eyes on a horizon. She never stopped. Maybe that is winning. Maybe winning is just, you did not stop me. Maybe that is enough. I have the banker's box in my closet now. I have read everything in it. I am going to send it back to her. I am going to send it back with a note that says, thank you. I am going to send it back because it is hers. It is her record. It is her evidence. It is the proof that she was there, that she flew, that she was good, that one man tried to end it, and that she did not let him. The proof should be in her house, not in mine. Her name is Major Diane Holcomb, United States Air Force, retired. She flew F-16CS in combat over Serbia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. She was grounded twice by the same flight surgeon on diagnoses that were overturned both times. She fought the system for 4 years and won on paper and lost in practice and left the Air Force at 36 and started over and built a second career that is, by any measure, extraordinary. She is 56 years old. She lives in Memphis, Tennessee. She flies 777s across oceans in the dark. She is fine. Say her name once today, out loud or to yourself. Doesn't matter. Just once. If you serve with someone like her, comments are open. I will be back next week with another one. Bring someone.